What if I told you there was a company on the Nasdaq that you could invest in that is trying to solve the third largest killer within the United States? Now, for those of you guys that don't know, the third largest killer behind the United States is sepsis, or basically your body attacking itself with a bacterial infection. And it's right behind the leading killers of oncology, which is cancer, and cardiovascular disease. Now, what Allocetra does is it basically tries to boost the immune system to reprogram itself. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that and Enlivex, which is the company that's creating Allocetra, and the pipeline and where the potential total addressable market is, whether it's through sepsis or whether it's through tumor relief. And we'll see where they are within the clinical trials, some of which have already progressed on to phase 2B and some of which are preclinical trials as well. So we'll be able to look at actual data coming out of, say, 3 separate areas. First and foremost being sepsis, secondarily being tumors, and a third being ovarian tumors that we were able to observe in rats for preclinical trials. So I'm really curious to see what you guys think at ENLV or Enlivex on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below, and I'll see you guys in the computer.
Enlivex, rebalancing hyperimmune responses. In handling threats, our immune system relies on several key players. First, macrophages and dendritic cells detect and devour pathogens. Second, the macrophages release cytokines, which are signals that alert the rest of the immune system into action. This activates the third player, T cells, killer cells, and others who respond to the alert signals by attacking the threat. This allows for a relaxation mechanism. Once the macrophages devour enough early apoptotic cells, they signal an all clear and the system rebalances to its normal state, cytokine release syndrome, or a cytokine storm. In this hyperimmune response, cytokine signaling spirals out of control, causing the immune system to violently attack healthy organs. Cytokine storms are extremely dangerous and can lead to organ damage, multiple organ failure, and death. In fact, they are the third leading cause of mortality in the United States after cardiovascular diseases and cancer. To truly avert cytokine storms and restore immune balance, Enlivex has developed Allocetra. This novel therapy uses the body's own natural regulation mechanisms without suppressing the immune system. With Allocetra, billions of densely concentrated early apoptotic cells are infused into the patient's bloodstream. This causes the macrophages and dendritic cells to feed on the Allocetra cells, thus releasing fewer and fewer cytokine alert signals until the immune system is rebalanced to its normal state. Crisis averted.
So for those of you guys that are potentially looking into Enlivex for potential investment, feel free to check out ENLV on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. The company is currently trading about at $5.13 US with a current market capitalization of just under $100 million. Now, I know the company as of March had about $70 million of cash on hand, which is going to allow them to run without capital constraints until the 2024 timeframe, where they then might have to go into secondary funding. Now, obviously, we're going to jump into the investor presentation, but I wanted to outline initially what the stock and the ticker symbol was for you guys in case you guys are looking for the company. So hopping into the Enlivex June 6, 2022 investor presentation, we're going to be talking about Allocetra, which is an off-the-shelf universal microphage reprogramming medicine that assists with cell therapies for life-threatening diseases. So what macrophages really are the things that kick off your immune system, that says, hey, we have some problems here, then kicks off the killer cells and the T cells to go about and basically do their business to get rid of some of these diseases. But some of those macrophages aren't necessarily equipped to be able to kick off the immune system. And so what it does is Allocetra works with the macrophages to be able to reprogram them and make them suitable to help and work with your immune system to help fight off some of those diseases. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that assists with, say, bacterial diseases like sepsis, and also a little bit about tumors, growth tumors as well. So how Enlivex differs from some of the other drugs that are potentially out there. They're not going after engineered T cells. Generally speaking, previous medications are high cost of goods sold, not necessarily scalable. But the opportunity that Enlivex is going for with Allocetra is an off-the-shelf, scalable, low cost of goods sold sort of model. Now, looking at two potential ways that Allocetra can help. On the top, you can see on the right-hand side the opportunity associated with sepsis, ARDS, ARF, post-heart surgery, sort of pro-inflammatory, pro-organ damage sort of area. And what Allocetra tries to do is get you back to homeostasis, bringing you back to the normal sort of state. And then in the lower side, you can kind of see where we have pro-tumor activity and some other oncology sort of medications that are potentially working together to bring solid cancers like tumors back to the macrophage population homeostasis, to basically have anti-tumor activity and eliminate some of those cancers in combination with other medicines. Looking at the opportunity that Allocetra has in the pipeline of reprogrammable indications that it might have, looking first and foremost at sepsis, which is the largest one. It has already completed phase 1B and has gone into phase 2B, which was initiated in Q1 of 2021, and it's anticipating the completion of phase 2 in Q3 of 2023. Now, others are solid tumors, whether that's with respect to ovarian cancers or with respect to other cancers dealing with combination of chemotherapy. Phase 1B is anticipated to start in 2022 for both of those opportunities, and we'll be able to see that continue in future news releases going forward. Sepsis organ failure is an approximately $33 billion market, and then the other two is a little bit smaller, but still an $8 billion opportunity for both of them combined. Now let's take a quick look at Allocetra and the trials that are ongoing for the elimination of sepsis. So let's take a quick opportunity to look at phase 1B clinical trial of the macrophage reprogramming in sepsis patients. So the norm is this orange or red dot that you see here for normal values, and you can see the different patients and their different levels of sepsis depending on what kind of cytokines that they have, which is basically inflammatory pieces within the body. And you can see very quickly they all try to normalize back down within a 20 to 28 day time frame. And you can see the majority of so do that rather quickly in some of these instances. And you can see a very similar sort of scenario if you have anti-inflammatory cytokines observed in the body as well. Every one of these is trying to get back to this zero value in the body, and you can see the different values for all the different patients throughout. Now, sepsis, as we know, leads to organ failures. So this is basically looking at the organ failure assessment score from phase 1B of Allocetra. Now, looking at how Allocetra was utilized in sepsis patients here, you can look on the graph to the left, and you can immediately see that with those that received Allocetra, they were able to leave after 28 days alive and their organs fully recovered 100% of the time, whereas the controls, only 41% of the time that was true. So going into the severity of how the organ failure analysis went down, on the right-hand side, you can see that those were treated were able to walk away 100% of the time, or a very good analysis, or 0 to 1, meaning everything's fully recovered, whereas after 28 days on the control side, only 41% were able to do so. Now, it's unfortunate to say that 27% of those that were on the control side unfortunately passed, whereas on the Allocetra side, 0% of the people passed, and also they were able to fully recover without any sort of problems. The same cannot be said for those in the control. Just looking at Allocetra and the time to discharge once again, so those that were treated, you could see immediately after 8 days, everybody was able to walk out of the hospital and be able to be treated fully alive, fully recovered, organs were perfectly intact, whereas not the same was to be said about the control in this particular case. And if you kind of look at the average organ failure analysis over the course of time here, you could see that in the treated, you could see it tracks rather down very quickly and kind of reaches an area of 0 close to within the first couple days of this medicine, whereas the same cannot be said for those under the control. Now, what this is going to do is show the Allocetra preclinical data for the solid tumor microenvironment in rats. Now, what this basically shows is the solid tumor for mesothelioma in rats, and after the case of, say, 30 days and beyond, you can see that the most likely scenario is expected death for these rats. Now, let's see, with a combination of CTLA4 with Allocetra, what the impact of that will be. Now you can see with mesothelioma, no treatment, this red line leading to certain death or the 0% of survival after the case of, say, 60 or so days. And you can see the variation of combinations with the anti-CTLA4 and Allocetra in differing doses. And you can see with the highest dose in combination with anti-CTLA4, you have the majority of, or 90% of, these rats staying alive longer than 80 days. And you can see the variation of, say, just the anti-CTLA4, basically still only getting to a 10% survival rate here, versus, say, the combination of the two, and whether it's a low dose, medium dose, or high dose. You can just see the impacts of that, where over 60% in all these sort of cases with the combination of Allocetra and anti-CTLA4 survive. Now, this is just a qualitative look of how this basically works out, rather than a graphic look. Now, you can just see here on day 6 all these different rats and basically where they are within the survival rating. And you can just kind of see through time, with depending on what treatment and what combination of the Allocetra and anti-CTLA4, where they basically get to. You can see even still with some of the mesothelioma and Allocetra by itself, even with the high dose, you do end up with a mortality rate of about 71.5%. And the combination of Allocetra and anti-CTLA4 with the high dose, you can see there's a 100% survival rate, and a complete cure of the solid tumors. Now, to do a quick look at the same preclinical trials with ovarian cancers, you can see relatively similar results, except for this time it's with anti-PD-1 at a dosage of 1.25 milligrams per kilogram monotherapy here. And you can just look specifically at all the different mortality rates associated with this as well. With no treatment, 100% death rate as you get to, say, week 12, but a combination of Allocetra and anti-PD-1, you're able to basically get to a 50% mortality rate, which obviously is much better survival comparatively to compared to 100%. Now, let's take a quick look at the planned milestones over the course of the next 24 months. So obviously we are currently in 2Q of 2022, where they're continuing to have Allocetra into the phase 2 sepsis and oncology studies. Going into 3Q of this year, we're going to have the initiation of phase 1B, the advanced stage solid tumor patients with peritoneal metastasis and a combination of chemotherapy. So with that, by Q1 of next year, we'll be able to get interim data for the reprogramming of sepsis patients, which is the phase 2. And then by the second half of 2023, we're getting the top line data for the sepsis phase 2 reprogramming information, and the completion of the new Allocetra manufacturing facility is anticipated to be in the second half of 2023 as well. Now, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, the financial summary, currently about $78 million in cash at the end of 1Q 2022. No debt at the moment, with shares outstanding about 18.2 million shares, funded until the second half of 2024. Key management, we'll start off with the executive chairman, who was the founder and president of Prolor Biotech, which he sold in 2013 for over $560 million. Coupling with the experience of the executive chairman, you have folks on the board that have decades worth of experience across multiple clinical programs that have gone through phase 1, 2, and 3. Thank you for taking the opportunity to walk through the Enlivex investor presentation with me today. I think it's a very interesting problem, the third largest killer within the United States, which is sepsis. And you have the opportunity to invest in a company that is currently trying to address this problem, coupling that with the addressing of the tumor situation that goes on, whether it's in certain cancers, ovarian cancers as well. And it's just a different method of how you potentially can access or rejuvenate your immune system to be able to attack these sort of diseases and attack these sorts of problems of the body that hasn't necessarily been done before. And so it's interesting to see in the clinical trials going through the results of the phase 1 for Allocetra, specifically towards sepsis, and the preclinical studies that have been done associated with tumors in some of the rats that they've done some analysis on. So really curious to see what happens with the company kind of going forward. Nasdaq ENLV Enlivex. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.